It is too long ago. I was in the middle before I knew that I had begun. In Jane Austen's beloved novel Pride and Prejudice, we follow the conflict and eventual romance between Mr. Darcy and Elizabeth Bennet. This progression from being standoffish to intense devotion takes place over numerous chapters and encounters with other characters, plot points, and a variety of settings. Beyond being a gripping story, Pride and Prejudice also reveals plenty about narrative, which brings us onto the field I am discussing today, narratology, the theory and systematic study of narrative. By practicing narratology, we can better understand Jane Austen's intent, the stories she crafted, the connections between her heroines and Regency history, as well as the wider literary context she wrote in. We know stories are important and powerful, but how do they work exactly? Here, I will illuminate how this fascinating field extends far beyond literary analysis and into our everyday lives, our psychology, and even our sense of self. Covering history, self-help books, magical realism, and psychological thrillers, let's explore narratology and the power of narratives. I'm Madeline Rose Jones, and I study history, literature, and culture. Welcome to Snowy Fictions. Narratology is the theory and systematic study of narrative. It examines how stories are structured, how they communicate meaning, and how we interpret them. But what exactly is a narrative? A narrative is essentially a representation of events or experiences in a temporal sequence. More simply put, it's a story with a beginning, middle, and end that unfolds over time. Narratology gives us the tools to analyze how these stories work. The field emerged primarily in the mid-20th century with structuralist thinkers like Roland Barthes, Svetlana Todorova, and Gerard Bennett, developing frameworks to understand narrative components and their relationships. But its roots extend back to Aristotle's Poetics and his analysis of tragedy. While traditional narratology focused on literary texts, contemporary narratology has expanded to study narratives across media, from films and television to video games, social media posts, and even the stories we tell ourselves about our own lives. This expansive view can help us unlock the power of narratives, whether fictional or real. Narratologists distinguish between several key elements. The first, the story, or fabula, the chronological sequence of events as they would have occurred, and second, the discourse, how these events are actually presented to us, and finally, the narration, the act of telling or presenting the story. Think of a film like Memento, directed by Christopher Nolan. The story is straightforward enough. A man with amnesia seeks revenge for his wife's murder, but the discourse presents events in reverse chronological order, creating a disorienting experience that mimics the protagonist's confusion. Narratologists also examine narrators. Who tells the story? Are they reliable? What do they know? They also analyze focalization. Whose perspective do we share? They look at narrative time. How does the pace of telling relate to the pace of events? This may sound like technical concerns for literary critics, but understanding these structures changes how we experience stories. And as we'll see, stories shape much more than our entertainment. Let's look at two examples from literature to see narratology in action. First, consider Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. Speaking in terms of narratology, this novel employs what we call free indirect discourse, a technique where the third-person narrator slides seamlessly into a character's consciousness. When the narrator tells us, it is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a good fortune must be in want of a wife, we're experiencing a blend of the narrator's voice and the social attitudes of the characters. This narrative technique creates ironic distance. We simultaneously understand Elizabeth Bennet's perspective while seeing beyond it. The narratological structure invites readers to question social assumptions while engaging with an entertaining romance. Now, contrast this with Gabriel García Márquez's 100 Years of Solitude. We encounter a different narrative strategy: magical realism. The narrative voice matter-of-factly presents supernatural events alongside ordinary ones, blurring boundaries between reality and fantasy. When the character, Remedios the Beauty, ascends to heaven while folding laundry, the narrator presents this as unremarkable. This narratological approach transforms the supernatural into the mundane, creating a distinct literary effect, where extraordinary events are treated as ordinary parts of reality. This technique connects to broader literary and artistic movements, including social realism, by presenting alternative ways of portraying human experience. The narrative structure itself becomes a powerful tool for expanding storytelling possibilities. Narratology has proven invaluable in comparative literature, offering a framework for analysing stories across cultures, time periods, and languages. By focusing on narrative structures rather than only content, comparatists can identify formal patterns and innovations that transcend cultural boundaries, particularly in the realm of mythology, religion, and folklore. For instance, narratological analysis reveals fascinating parallels between ancient epic structures in Homer's Odyssey, the Indian Mahabharata, and the Mesopotamian Epic of Gilgamesh. All employ frame narratives, episodic structures, and divine interventions, suggesting something universal about how humans organize experiences through story. If you'd like to learn more about comparative literature, I highly recommend watching my short explainer video about what it is and its potential. Yet, comparative literature, when combined with narratology, can also reveal differences. Cultures are not interchangeable, and literary history demonstrates not only the similarities, but also the stark divisions. Take World War II movies and books. An American film may differ to a French novel. This raises fascinating questions about how different nations and languages perceive World War II and how they choose to memorize and think about it. History and narratology share a profound connection. Historical texts are not merely collections of facts. They are narratives, constructed with specific rhetorical purposes and structural choices. Medieval Western history provides particularly rich examples of this relationship. Consider the medieval chronicle tradition. Works like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle or Gregory of Tours' History of the Franks employ distinctive narrative strategies that shape our understanding of the past. These chronicles blend historical events with supernatural occurrences, dynastic propaganda, and moral instruction, often using analytic structures that organize events by year rather than by casual relationship. The Bayeux Tapestry, depicting the Norman conquest of England in 1066 AD, offers another fascinating narratological case study. This visual narrative employs techniques like simultaneous narration, where multiple time frames appear in a single panel, and uses visual motifs to guide the viewer's understanding of the story's moral implications. Medieval hagiographies, stories of saint lives, represent another distinctive narrative form. Texts like Jacobus de Orangian's Golden Legend follow specific structural patterns that transform historical figures into exemplary models. These narratives employ formulaic elements like childhood prodigies, miraculous interventions, and martyrdom scenes that signal spirituality to the audience. By applying narratological analysis to these historical texts, we gain insight not just into what medieval people believed happened, but how they made meaning from events through narrative structures. These narrative choices reveal as much about the medieval worldview as the actual content of these histories. As we can see, narratology offers more than an insight into narratives and storytelling and can unlock the ways humanity creates meaning and remembers history. Narratology's significance extends far beyond literary analysis. The narrative structures we've discussed shape our everyday lives in profound ways and have contributed to our understanding of psychology and influence the popularity of self-help non-fiction. Consider how you would answer if someone asked, "How was your day?" You wouldn't list everything that happened. Instead, you'd select certain events, arrange them in a particular sequence, emphasize some while minimizing others. In other words, you'd construct a narrative. This isn't just a communication strategy, it's how we make sense of experience. Cognitive psychologists tell us that human memory itself is narrative in structure. We remember our lives not as disconnected moments, but as coherent stories with casual connections. Our very identity, our sense of who we are, is constructed through the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves. These personal narratives aren't neutral. They shape our understanding of the past and expectations for the future. Someone who narrates their life as a series of victimizations will experience events differently than someone who narrates it as a journey of growth through challenges. This is where narratology intersects with psychology and self-help approaches. Narrative therapy, developed by Michael White and David Epstein, explicitly applies narratological principles to psychological treatment. It recognizes that people often become trapped in problem-saturated narratives about their daily lives. For example, someone struggling with depression might have constructed a narrative where they're fundamentally flawed and destined to fall. A narrative therapist would help them identify moments that simply do not fit this story and develop an alternative narrative emphasizing their resilience and capacity for connection. Popular self-help approaches often involve similar narratological reframing. When we're told to change our story or rewrite our narrative, we're being encouraged to apply narratological principles to our self-understanding. I started this video off with an example of Pride and Prejudice, and it's true. Stories reveal how characters interact with one another, and in the context of Regency drama, these interactions are ripe with potential too. But I suppose our own social interactions are shaped also by narratives and storytelling. Sociologists point out that we live surrounded by master narratives, dominant cultural stories about how lives should unfold or how certain groups of people are. These master narratives shape our expectations and judgments, often in our unconscious. For instance, the American Dream narrative suggests that anyone who works hard can succeed regardless of their circumstances. This master narrative shapes how we interpret both success and failure, often attributing success to individual merit and personal responsibility. Understanding narratology helps us recognize these master narratives and their influence. It allows us to ask, how do different narrative frameworks shape our understanding? What assumptions underlie common storytelling patterns? How might alternative narrative approaches offer new insights? This awareness can transform how we interact with others. Instead of imposing our narrative expectations, we can become more receptive to different ways of story making. We can recognize that what seems like a coherent narrative to us might feel fragmented or distorted to someone with different experiences and opinions. In a very real sense, we live in and through narratives. Our lives are not merely a series of events that happens to us. They are stories we construct, revise, and share. Understanding the mechanisms of these narratives gives us greater agency in shaping them. The next time you read a novel, watch a film, or even tell a friend about your day, try to notice the narrative structures at work. Ask yourself, what's been selected for telling and what's been left out? Who's telling the story and why? What alternative narratives could be constructed from the same elements? This narratological awareness won't just enrich your appreciation of stories, it might just transform how you understand your own life and your connections with others. But back to you. What are your thoughts on narratology? What genres do you personally identify with? Comment below. I'd love to know your thoughts and start a discussion. Subscribe for frequent videos about history, literature, and culture. I also have a mailing list, a blog, and creative writing classes, all linked below. Thank you for watching, and I will certainly see you soon. Bye for now.